have our another new episode, and this is very very important for us because World Talent Economy Forum, we are working with Malaysian government for Resilient Malaysia, and we want to give special thanks to Honorable Minister Yap Dr. Ching To. Already he give special thanks to World Talent Economy Forum and our honorable speakers, those who will join in climate change discussions. It will be open dialogue, 25 October, and it will be one of the largest public-private partnership dialogue in Asia Pacific, and we are contributing for the developing ecosystems in Malaysia based on climate change. Definitely, we have a project for water purification, smart city, solar energy. We have more than 2,700 projects in Asia Pacific. So World Talent Economy Forum, we are more in national development, especially the developing nations, beside Malaysia, even Indonesia, India, Bangladesh, and few other countries also communicate with World Talent Economy Forums, and we love to contribute in real life projects. Yes, with the Malaysian government, we are developing a blueprints. So I want to give special thanks to our board of advisors, our scientific committee members, as well as our ambassadors from 100 different countries. And we are really, really happy that today we have our world famous speakers, Mr. James from Stanford University. He is contributing in research and academy long term, and he is very, very valuable for World Talent Economy Forum, and we are open for open dialogue, and especially as World Talent Economy Forum contributing for national developments. So your knowledge, your expertise is welcome in Asia Pacific, and we are also developing 1 million students communities in Asia Pacific with in developing nations. So your contribution always helpful for us. Mr. James, how you want to analyze negative CO2 emissions? What are the interesting, because I know Asia Pacific youth communities and the people, they are big fan of Stanford universities. Even Stanford University has a strong collaboration with Malaysia Cyberjaya, and they are contributing through MAGIC, Malaysia Global Innovation and Creativity Centers. So what you want to analyze with us, and how you want to contribute for Asia Pacific.
Thank you. Good morning. Assalamu alaikum. I'm based here at Stanford University, but I have had the pleasure to be invited to Malaysia 3 times since 2014 to discuss this topic of life outside of cities and building especially strong, hyper-local, regenerative and resilient neighborhoods, a neighborhood infrastructure that's focused primarily on critical life support systems. So clean water, clean energy, high yield organic food production, waste to resource management, and this concept really that you don't need to live in the city to be productive and to have self-worth, and also to be able to take care of yourself and your family. So our goal has been, very much aligned with that of the Malaysian government now for many years, which is looking at the kampung. And many people in Malaysia, of course, are maybe just half a generation or less away from their kampung, right? Their village.
Yes.
Be able to create this circumstance where people can return home in a way, but in a fashion that allows them to live in these very beautiful turnkey communities that uplifts the social and affordable housing and creates these places where people can flourish. So my current affiliation is at Stanford is I'm an entrepreneur in residence in the School of Medicine in what's called the Stanford Flourishing Project. Came through the School of Mechanical Engineering at the Center for Design Research at Stanford for the, let's say, the nuts and bolts behind what Regen Villages is about. But then we formed a Dutch spin-off company, an impact vehicle that would allow us to engage with sovereign wealth and pension funds around the world to really be able to consider how we can fund at industrial scale, use that in the right way, the ability to be able to create these neighborhoods rapidly and in a repeated fashion around the world by climate zone. And just want to touch on the fact that we're also developing software called our Village OS, our Village Operating System, which is a combination of digital twin, machine learning, and essentially a generative design and operational platform that gives people the power, landowners, developers, communities, but people the power to design these beautiful neighborhoods in such a way that we can fast track policymaking and change how the rules are in such a way that it benefits people and planet. So that, in a nutshell, is what Regen Villages is about, and I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you. I have, because as we have to deal with the grassroots level people and especially different developing nations, I have few questions I will ask you. I know you have your own meeting and other things. Then definitely I will give like opportunity to other speaker. Mr. James, especially healthcare is a major challenges right now. Even though we are discussing about negative CO2 emissions, and every countries they are facing a lot of challenges, especially developing nations. Even Asia Pacific, 40% population around the world live in Asia Pacific. So what the new innovations you have, especially for the developing nation? The developing nations, they do not have like affordabilities and this kind of things they need to concern. If it's too much of expensive, maybe they cannot afford. But uh, uh, we are very concerned because already many corporate house and the government bodies and the academy, they are interested to find out more solutions. So what kind of solutions you have from Stanford University?
Really look, a lot of the solutions we're talking about in emerging economies are actually really low tech. And the truth is that power, I keep wanting to reiterate this, the power is in the peri-urban and the rural. These are the areas that have already strength in their own resiliency. They know how to feed themselves. They know how to hydrate themselves. They know how to live with intermittent power and find innovative solutions for hygiene. They So what we have to do is to complement these areas in creating this sort of design for extreme affordability solutions that enable more and more people to think, do I really want to live in this slum next to the city, not able to fully feed myself or my family, and have compromised health issues? Or should I maybe think about going back to the peri-urban and the rural areas where I see that there's a sort of new gleaming, shining light that allows me to flourish and be healthy and live in balance and symbiosis, right, with the natural world? So that, I think, is we're not talking about one thing or another. Now, we're not talking about Kuala Lumpur or outside of the city, either or. We're talking about a balance, right, of being able to have more people think differently before they leave the rural areas for the cities, and then also that we can attract those people in those urban areas who are not doing well to be able to live well outside of the cities. So that's what we really want to bring to the table for emerging economies. And we're working hard, tirelessly, to be able to focus on every single day how we can address almost all the 17 Sustainable Development Goals under one umbrella, right? Which is critical housing shortages, access to your natural resource flows. When you have that, you start to address and answer almost all of those other facets for addressing poverty, women's rights, healthcare. All of those pieces fall into place when people are living in safe, secure, dignified housing and communities.
Excellent. Actually, we are observing even from the developing nation, especially country like Bangladesh, they are developing, and the Prime Minister of Bangladesh developing this smart village concept. Maybe they are getting consulting and support from Stanford University. So, smart village concept right now very popular, and government trying to implement it. Even the COVID-19 situation, many people they left the city, they're going back to village, and they need sustainable village as well. My last questions to you, like do you believe that when we think about climate change and SDG and ESG, we are observing country like Bangladesh from emerging economy and India, Maldives, Indonesia, they will be highly affected for the climate change. So, what type of strategy they can take for negative CO2 emissions, or uh, how they can develop better blueprint for solving these things?
Well, first and foremost, I think we have to unpack what the word smart means. Okay,
Mhm,
because if it's not self-reliant, self-sustaining, regenerative, and resilient, from our perspective, it's not smart. It's just not,
mhm,
right? It's just tech for tech's sake, and it's important, of course, to have internet connectivity, but it's not the end all be all. You have to be able to feed your family and have the capability for self reliance at the neighborhood scale. So, in emerging economies, it's critically important that we celebrate the peri-urban and rural areas for their strength, for what they
mhm,
actually bring to the table. It's called indigenous wisdom, right? And that indigenous wisdom is absolutely what we want and need to inform what our machine learning and our software is capable of
mhm,
then expressing. And what is that indigenous wisdom? It's natural resource flows, it's
mhm,
symbiosis, it's the ability to restore ecosystems,
mhm,
right? I like to say that if you take a half a step towards Mother Earth, she will throw her arms around us and take care of us. And that's what we
mhm,
really need to do. So I'm
mhm.
grateful for this time to be together, and I have to run to my next call. But I hope that some of the things that I've said are impactful. I'm sure you can find a way, Sharif, to connect everyone to my email and to our work. So I look forward to being in touch.
Thank you, Professor James. We want to invite you in our board because we are strongly engaged with different ecosystem of developing nations. We are trying to solve many local problem. So your contributions and all of our speakers' contribution is very important for us. And we need a team. We have to work as a team, and that is the way we can contribute. And you can, if you have enough time, you can interact with other speakers because they will analyze the same topic. Now I want to gives chance to Professor Paul. Yes.
Yes, hello. Is my sound okay?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So negative carbon emissions, very simply, I like to think of it as we're just trying to find ways to pull carbon out of the atmosphere, which is the exact opposite to what we've been doing for centuries by emitting carbon into the atmosphere. So it's like a bathtub or a sink, and the tap is wide open. Those are the emissions, and the drain is partially clogged or a trickle. Those are the sinks. Up to now, they're just the sinks of the Earth system, and they're failing because the oceans are warming too much, and we're losing rainforest, and trees are burning, and wildfires, and so on. So our sinks are reducing of carbon, and the sources are increasing. So the water level, of course, is going up, and the water level in the bathtub is the carbon in the atmosphere and oceans. Um, on price wise, okay, and everything is run by the mighty dollar, whether we like it or not. On price wise, governments are talking about implementing carbon taxes or fee and dividends to slow down the tap, to give incentives to reduce the amount of water coming into the bathtub from the tap. But instead of that, they've increased fossil fuel subsidies, especially after the COVID recovery. So they've been opening the tap wider and wider. So as long as governments continue to fund, to subsidize fossil fuels, that's like a negative price on carbon. We're talking about negative emissions. Well, the government is in fact putting a negative price on carbon. Instead of make incentives to reduce carbon use, all the incentives from the government are to increase carbon use. So as long as we will know, the world will know, people will know, populations will know the government is serious on addressing climate change when those fossil fuel subsidies disappear to zero. Now, there's lots of different lots. There's a number of different companies, startups, or they're looking at ways to take carbon out of the atmosphere, because as we phase down fossil fuel emissions, we need to ramp up as quickly as possible removal of carbon from the atmosphere. And there's some pilot projects to do that. There's some small scale projects. A project in Iceland to remove carbon from the atmosphere and bury it under the ground hit the media to great accolades recently, but it only offsets about 400 cars or something. So it's a pilot project, very, very small scale. We need to we need to scale up all of these things. We need huge amounts of money. I really think that in order to solve the problem, we need military budgets to be diverted to carbon dioxide removal technologies and methods in order to address this climate emergency. So, there's billionaires are getting into the game for negative carbon emissions. Look at Elon Musk's X Prize, $100 million to go to ways to, companies that can pull carbon out of the atmosphere. We tend to forget the oceans. We tend to think of machines or devices or trees on land to remove carbon, but the oceans occupy 70% of the surface area of the Earth, and there's lots of carbon dioxide dissolved in seawater. And my guess would be, my gut feeling would be that it will become far easier to remove carbon from the oceans than it will be from the atmosphere. So that's the way to go. If we remove carbon from either the oceans or the atmosphere, there's enough exchange between them at the surface that reducing carbon in one, the atmosphere would automatically start reducing it in the ocean, because more would come out of the ocean into the atmosphere, and vice versa. So we can't forget about that. Basically, we have to do this, of course, at great urgency, because the climate system is rapidly spiraling out of control. And I think, this last year has really shown how severe and how bad it's become. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Donald.
Unmute, Donald.
There we go. Yeah, I think that the story about the thing in Iceland is pretty interesting, because what they're doing is they're taking CO2 out of the atmosphere, they're mixing it with water, and they're basically turning it into carbonated water, which is actually mildly acidic. It's carbolic acid. And then they're pumping it into the ground, where it dissolves minerals, and basically turns it into limestone. And then limestone lasts basically forever. Where I live is the rock underneath me is limestone, and it's going to be there for a long time. And but it's very expensive, as he just pointed out. It's however, what's interesting about it is that they've actually turned it into a business, because what happens is that companies can produce carbon as long as they offset the carbon. So in other words, if they have a way that they produce a ton of carbon, that somehow a ton of carbon is removed so that there's zero, we talk about zero emissions rather than in a situation like that, then they're okay. There's zero emissions. The Palo Alto power company is zero emissions, meaning that they use up as much carbon dioxide as they create. So what the people in Iceland have been doing is they've been selling the basically the offsets, and they're selling them for, catch this, $1,200 a ton. I mean, that is absolutely outrageous, and it's all booked. I mean, they're selling every single solitary bit of it that they possibly can, and they hope to get it down to $120 a ton. But even so, that's fairly expensive. And what's interesting, I think, if you think about this, is this doesn't then require a central government to necessarily take charge of doing this, or basically to mandate that you do it necessarily. What they need to mandate is that is zero emissions, basically. And so when you say that the emissions have to be zero and people have to figure out some way of doing it, then entrepreneurs can come up with some sort of a business, as in this case, to be able to come up with businesses to offset carbon. Now, the difficulty of it is Newton's second law of thermodynamics. We're kind of beating our head against that, which is that once we burn fossil fuel, it's released energy, and that's the point of doing it. We basically have these complex carbohydrates, carbon molecules that are held together, and when we burn them, the energy that's holding them together is released, and we use that energy to do all kinds of wonderful things. But once you release the energy, in order to put them back together, you have to use energy. And now Iceland can do this because they have an incredible amount of geothermal energy. They're just sitting on a bunch of volcanoes there. So they're using the geothermal energy that they have available to them, which is completely clean energy, to be able to basically take the arrow of entropy the other way. In other words, I mean, they're basically, it's basically, if you imagine you have an aquarium, and in the middle there's a piece of glass, and in that piece of glass you in that aquarium you put ice cold water in one side and very hot water in the other side, and you pull out the piece of glass, then the water mixes together so it becomes warm water. Then how are you going to get it back to the state where it's warm water on one side and cold water on the other side? Well, you have to use energy to be able to do that, and that's basically what we're trying to do. We're trying to sort the stuff out into two piles again, and that requires energy. So we're kind of in a bind about getting the CO2 out of the atmosphere because it really requires energy in order to do that. So what they're doing in Iceland is a good stab at it. I think, as everyone knows, I was for years part of the group at Stanford called the Silicon Valley Network Analysis Project, and I was a visiting scholar in sociology there. And I've also worked in sociology, working with a professor at Columbia for several years. And I'd be really, really interested to see about this smart villages concept, because I was researching this, and this does relate to CO2. I was researching this, and it turns out over half the livable land on Earth right now is being used by farming. Half. And we are running into a wall where we can't necessarily keep expanding it. And no one knows for sure, because it's been very difficult to study. And there's been several studies, and there's been no studies that show that organic uses less land than conventional agriculture. But there's been a number of studies that show that organic uses significantly more land than conventional agriculture. And the number that I think is the one that I saw most reliable is about 40% more land. So one way of looking at organic agriculture is that it's a luxury good for wealthy people. It's not a sustainable goal. It's not a sustainable way of agriculture. So I'm very, very skeptical. I'm skeptical about how we're going to be able to feed everybody by kind of cycling back to, you know, the good old days when we, you know, lived, you know, we were happy natives, you know, living in villages, dying of cholera and all that kind of stuff. I don't really see that. And people, the energy that it takes to have everything distributed is very high, because if you want to, if people really want to limit if somehow they can psychologically learn to limit their lifestyles so that they don't have the internet and they don't have the things that they see other people having, and somehow they can get into this mindset where they feel that they're better off, like basically like living, I don't know, lives that then maybe we can do that. But I mean, I'd be really, really interested to see sociologically and psychologically how that could actually take place. But then back to the CO2, I agree that we're paying, instead of paying for the carbon to be sequestered, or the carbon to be removed from the atmosphere, or removed. Trees are another way of doing it. They're a cheaper way of doing it, but right now we can't plant enough trees, so it's too late to do that. So, but we can't subsidize fuel anymore, fossil fuel. We have to stop using it, and that's the only choice we have right now.
Thank you, Mr. Raja. There is a question from audience. What are natural climate solutions? I think our audience want to know more, some sort of solutions for CO2 emissions.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Unmuted. The solution is a bit startling, I must say, because I had a look at what Microsoft has come out with, target of 2030 to make it zero emission. What we are sending out and what we are collecting back is zeroed. And they also have from up to 2050 the target, so that zero emission is being done for whatever the products that they are producing from 1975. There are a lot of effort being put in by various individual organizations, individuals like you, as Donald had been talking about. And what I find a bit strange in terms of solution, what I call it is accounting for climate change. When you try to do the accounting for climate change, there's a tremendous impact which I am looking at. The impact is in terms of ESG funds. In one of the reports which I saw is that 40.5 trillion ESG data committed being talked about in terms of the organizations that they are trying to develop in terms of ESG data for CO2 emission reduction. That being the case, there's a lot of ESG funds which have come about. The other day, Marshall had a very good talk about ESG funds, 500 million euros for converting the brownfield to greenfield. It's an excellent project, and I really love it. But what really happens in ESG funds? We are talking of very many companies, finance companies, very many people have, many organizations come out with the ESG funds. The ESG funds are being talked about in terms of the rating system. The rating system is triple C to triple A, average and exceptionally. On companies which are doing the work, like that of, say, Microsoft is doing it, there will be a rating of what the Microsoft does. So if the rating is giving AAA, then the investors can fund in that particular ESG fund, which in turn is committing themselves for very many such funds. Invest in Microsoft. If there are so many companies like Microsoft who are committed for zero emission, then these are the ones which they say are going to come out with a better returns than what they are investing today in some of the companies. But there is a rating system, which AAA rating. Now, Professor James just now talked about of 17 SDGs. When I look at this, there are 17 SDGs available, and one SDG we are talking about is one portion of it is climate change. In an organization, there has been a very great number of discussions about it, particularly in OECD. And when OECD said that corporate governance in the big companies are good, when Joseph Murphy, a corporate governance expert, said it is not so. He gave a lot of exception how it's not like, for example, Enron. And so many companies that corporate governance are supposed to be there may not be there. When we look at that rating system, the rating in terms of ESG rating done by a few people, and that of the ESG is environmental and social and governance. Social, there are 17 SDGs, 9 of them are social, 4 of them are environmental, and 4 of them are economic development goals. Now, the rating, if you take a particular company, the governance aspect of it, there are about 170 process blocks, and 12 of them are only quantitative, which we show in the balance sheet and P&L. The balance 158, they are all qualitative elements of management. And one of that 158 is ESG. So when we try to do that and rating system being done, because collectively these companies, they are not interested in revealing what their rating system of that 158 qualitative elements. And there is no way that the outsider, like some of the rating agencies, to go and locate that ESG part of it and come out with the ESG rating, and for which the ESG funds are going to be invested upon. So this is a very serious lookout on us to do that. And we've got to do, that's why I come out with the CREAM ratings, is corporate governance, risk management, earnings, accounting quality, and management quality, which collects, and CREAM rating is for the 170 process block, inclusive of quantitative and qualitative elements of management. And by return on intangible, that is the individual assigned to a particular, say, for example, a process block ESG. If there are 10 people or 100,000 people are there in a particular company, to do that ESG part of it, what is their participation? And one task is being given to 5 different people. One task is not given to one person. It could be a person who is directly involved, another person who is senior, the other person is a person from computer side or digital technology side. The fourth one is from accounting and HR. And so these are the 5 different elements are looking at the same task and get the return on intangible. What is their energy that they have put? That's what the CREAM ratings is all about. So when we do that, when you look at the solution part of it, that's the solution is available, which I have created in CREAM ratings just now available. If you're looking at the danger part of it, you please remember in 2008, in the congressional area, when they were all asked, the Fitch ratings, Moody's, and everyone on the S&P, they said, no, we don't know about it. This is our opinion. How did you give the AAA, particularly for when we talk of the Greenland? Greenland is a big disaster in terms of 2008 when so much. KPMG also gave a AAA rating, and it collapsed. The banks had collapsed. And that particular time, we told all these three people, it's my only our opinion, is only our opinion, is only our opinion, is only our opinion, based on which a third party or an investor, an ordinary investor, like $100, they want to put it in this sort of a mutual fund like ESG funds. They had become Lehman Brothers. And if you see a small movie called Margin Call, I mean, it is a disaster beyond imagination. Where are that in ESG? You're talking of environmental, you're talking of social development, you're talking of 17 SDGs. It is not ESG that is going directly to where it should, to the villager. It goes to a fund manager, it goes to an investor. It does not directly involve any of the companies like Microsoft being invested upon by this particular ESG funds. So the danger is very heavy. And we are talking about $40.5 trillion worth of ESG data in terms of investment and identified and the products that they are supposed to do, without realizing that we are doing a minuscule of one process block out of 158, and that is how we are making a judgment for investment. So this has to change. This has to be reduced. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Raja. Actually, World Talent Economy Forum, we always encourage different talented. Already many young people, they join in World Talent Economy Forum as our fellow, like Mr. Adam, also fellow for World Talent Economy Forum. Beside that, uh, uh, we have our board of advisors and our scientific committee, like Mr. Paul, Mr. Donalds, Mr. Dan is in our scientific committees as our board of advisor. But we want people like Mr. Raja. He's 79 years old, and how he actually contributing and sending me the write-up and analysis about our session. We are really impressed. We already finished around 375 episode. If you join in our editorial panel, we have our strong editorial panel. You can analyze different sessions and you can give us guideline. And that is the example for our youth communities. Age is not a matter. Age is just a number. If you are motivated enough, if you are knowledgeable, and if you want to contribute, age never be a matter. So we are talent economy. We are focusing on talents. Perhaps I really grateful to you, Mr. Raja, how you try to analyze your views. Even I'm impressed with your write-up. So that's why I want to invite you in our board. And your contributions will be very helpful for our youth community, very helpful for our developing nations. I know you are from India, but we need more leaders, more talented people like you. Thank you.
Thank you,
Now
sir.
I request,
Thank you.
thank you, Mr. James Eat. Thank you, Mr. Marshall, for joining today's session. Yes,
Finally,
Mr. James Eat.
Technology issues.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sharif. What a wonderful discussion, and I really appreciate all the previous contributors. And I don't want to single anyone out, but Sri Raja was talking about something that's near and dear to my heart, and that's metrics. How do we get to the actual facts rather than the opinions? And I believe that this requires a post-capitalist society, because the capitalist society that we live in is really good about fudging numbers or hiding numbers, or so that you don't look at the real data that you need to make an informed choice. This is an expertise that so many have become so good at, and to disguise what you're really wanting to know. And to and I use the term I won't go off on my soapbox, but I will return to the question of what are we talking about here. We're talking about CO2 negative, and so this is not. And what I hear is carbon tax, and what I hear is carbon capture and storage, BECS, this sort of thing. That's really what I hear about. But this idea of CO2 negative is just kind of percolating up in the world that I live in, and it's not given enough attention by far. And I do think we have to stop subsidizing fossil fuels. This is so depressing to me that we continue to do this in the face of this grave emergency. I'm not being melodramatic. We all are pretty much in agreement that this is the time to act. This is not the time to decide, well, we'll form a committee and study it for 20 years, and then we'll make a proposal and study that for 20 years. This is the time for action, but we're not prepared to act. But we must somehow get our acts together and cooperate and collaborate with one another, because we're all in this together. Now, we were asked, how do you do this in a natural way? Well, the first thing that comes to mind is both reforestation. We have torn down many trees, and trees are a natural way of being carbon negative, and afforestation, where there have not been trees before, plant trees. So this is one way to do this, but I really liked what Paul said about the oceans, you know, because I came across this term, and it's why I'm wearing this shirt today. If you can see the fish on the shirt, it's blue carbon, because we must start to concentrate not only just on the oceans, but on the marine, the ecosystems along the coasts, because these are priceless in terms of their carbon negativity. They're more efficient than trees, but we destroy them for ports, for other commercial activities, to build homes. And these have been destroyed, poisoned, but these are a saving grace if we just paid attention to them and restore the natural ecosystem, and they will take carbon out of the atmosphere. And we don't pay any attention to this. And this is a natural way of proceeding. So this is another way that we could make a big change. I'm talking about, you know, salt marshes, just marine wetlands in general. You know, these things, you know, they think that we think they're an eyesore or what have you, that they have to be cleared or drained. Or no, man, this is part of nature's way of coping with the industrial waste that man produces. So we need to support this, the coastal ecosystems. And the other thing that I read up about, I don't understand exactly too much. I'm not an expert by any way in this way, but plant-based building materials. You know, I was reading about plant-based, like concrete and cement, and doing things differently. Now, will this take some sort of financial investment? Yes, because we are all set up to do it the old way. Well, we can't afford to do it the old way, because what we're talking about in terms of cost, we have not factored in the cost to the environment. So it's environmental economics 101. There is a cost to dumping industrial waste into our rivers. There is a cost to dumping our industrial waste into the oceans. There are islands of plastic in the oceans now. This did not exist before recent times. This is not a natural phenomena. And we get people who talk about, they deny climate change. Well, you know, there's not too much we're going to be able to do about the deniers, because, you know, you can only do so much in terms of presenting them with information. And if they want to deny it, okay, there's going to be a certain percentage of deniers. And there's a certain percentage of people that say, well, climate change is natural. Throughout our history, we've gone through climate change. And this is begging the question. The question is, has man had an impact on climate change? And the answer is yes, since the dawn of the industrial age. And we've learned this, and over and over and over again. It's abundantly clear. No thinking human being could possibly deny it. We poured industrial waste into our rivers until they burned. And water boils, it doesn't burn. What was burning was what we were dumping into our rivers. Well, we thought the rivers were inexhaustible. Well, they weren't. Now we think the air is inexhaustible. Well, it isn't. We thought the oceans are inexhaustible. Well, they aren't. So we are the stewards of this planet, and we must take better care of it. And I like to say, ask not what the planet can do for you, but what you can do for the planet. Start by taking better care of it. Respect it. Thank you, Sharif. Wonderful show as usual.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. James. Mr. Dan. Mr. Dan.
Yes, thanks again for the important topic, and really glad to see Marshall here. I mean, I almost want to just give my time to him. He's the expert here. He's got the amazing range of projects. I hope we can hear about his progress. You know, when you talk about harmful CO2 emissions, it may be the most harmful emission is the misinformation coming from the fossil fuel sector, which you know is putting out stuff on the level of flat eartherism. You know, it's saying like, oh, it's the sun, you know, oh, it's volcanoes, you know. No, we can use all kinds of fact-based scientific evidence to see that these are human sources of emissions. And I think I wish we would talk more about biosphere disruption. I mean, the extinction, the mass extinction we're going through, the loss of habitat for wild creatures. You know, in my lifetime, I've seen the human population more than double and the number of mammals cut by half. In fact, 95% of the mammals on Earth are humans and their livestock right now. That only leaves 5% for things that aren't humans and stuff humans like to eat. So the food system is going to be huge in cleaning up our CO2 problem. I think I've mentioned before the average food mileage for an American plate is 1,500 miles the food travels before it ends up on the plate. And, you know, there's no reason we can't be having local food security webs. And it would, in fact, be a great way to get people back in touch with nature and to meet their neighbors. So I'm pretty hopeful about attacking this problem at the neighborhood scale level. And I will leave some time for our most esteemed experts to continue on with this.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Marshall, for joining today's session. We are discussing on negative CO2 emissions. You are expert, you are from industry, so how you want to analyze and give some good example for our audience.
Okay. Well, first of all, as everybody on this panel, and the last time I was on this panel has articulated, it is a massive problem. Time is of the essence. Everybody recognizes it except for the deniers. But throughout history and throughout human history, there's always been deniers. There's always been a group of people that will always work against what is science-based and science fact. So I'm not here to address those people because I don't think my words will convince them. What I'm here to tell you is what we're doing and what is being done and what can be done. And my analogy, I think the last time I was on this panel was, it may not have been, but I've been on so many panels that I've been trying to bring this analogy to the table. We know that time is of the essence. There is a canary in the coal mine, as they say, and not everybody may know that expression, but coal miners, of all people, used to go into coal mines in the 1800s, and they used to use a canary with them in a cage. And when the canary keeled over, they knew it was time to get out. Why? Because there was no oxygen, and the canary would die before the people would. So mostly they would get out unless there was an explosion, and then people would be trapped below. That's kind of the analogy of what Earth is facing now with its, and ironically, the coal mine industry has an analogy that brings to the table, which I kind of find ironic. They wanted coal miners to survive so they could continue to coal mine them. They may not have paid them well and given them good benefits, but at the end of the day, they still needed the coal miners. And now today, coal mining is pretty much automated for the most part. The reason I'm bringing that up is because we keep repeating our mistakes. And I think the definition of insanity is if you keep saying the same thing over and repeating your mistakes, that's insane. Now, I did study psychology. I do have a background in clinical psychology, and I can say definitively that yes, this is a form of insanity at a human level, at a humankind level that we're seeing. And there are many people that feel they are just hopeless and can't do anything about it. But I think we're talking at three different levels. What can people do personally to make an effort to contribute to this, and I think the other panelists have contributed greatly to this. What can people do to contribute to people who are trying to make an effort? And there's different things that people can do. They can contribute to not-for-profits. They if they have the money, they can invest in startups. But then the question is, or going concerns that have a mission. Our company is a little different. Our group is based on a capitalist approach, unfortunately, but it is what it is. It's a EU climate bond, and an EU climate bond is the only bond that has taxonomies that are highly regulated and highly watched. And the reason that's important is because whether we like it or not, people lie. They constantly lie about what they're doing. Royal Dutch Shell just got an injunction, well, not that long ago, from the EU court system saying that by 2025, they need to have a 45% carbon footprint. That's amazing. That is a huge undertaking. At the same day that court decision was handed down, there were two shareholder revolts, one with Chevron and one with Exxon. These are fossil fuel producing entities, and they're beginning to wake up and say, hey, maybe this isn't the right way. It's kind of interesting, but it's not surprising. And why do I say that? I became the co-chair of Working Group 3 for the cost action on biochar in Europe, which is paid for by the EU Parliament. And the reason I was given that task to become a co-chair with Dr. Saran Sohi at the UK Biochar Centre in Edinburgh was because I gave a what would you call a keynote at the time, back in, I think it was 2013, 2014, in Edinburgh at a conference meeting. And I talked about the adoption of biochar, which is a material that has been recognized by the IPCC as one of the 6 carbon sequestration tools. And that was just recognized in 2019. And here I'm speaking in 2013, 6 years before. So you have to ask, what happened in the interim? And what happened back in 2013? Well, in 2013, I was explaining to people that using the term biochar is problematic. But even if you use the term biochar, and we all agreed what it is and how it can be used, they were looking at it as a soil amendment, which is really great because it sequesters carbon in the soil for thousands of years, not hundreds of years, but thousands of years. How do we know that? By doing scientific research that was done in double-blind studies around the world through the Cost Action Group. And we created what's called a charchive. It's kind of a pun, but it is what it is. A charchive of different types of chars from different types of feedstock to create soil amendments at the time. Then we discovered that it could be used in macadam or cement or sequester carbon, all these different ways. So if you want to talk about practicality and what you can do, for example, in Northern Australia, and by the way, yesterday they just had an earthquake in Australia, 5.9 or 6.0, but it was, and they're not used to having them there, but they did have it. We believe that's all part and parcel of Gaia, of the Earth going crazy and reacting in different ways, kind of like the way humans react to different types of infections. So what we need to do is we need to get rid of this infection, and the way we do it is by taking waste, not feedstock, as, let's say, chop down forests. That's not the way to do it. Forests are really important for us to sequester carbon. They do it naturally. They use photosynthesis to do it, just like crops do in horticulture. But what we can do is we can take waste, human waste, organic waste, inorganic waste. I can take plastic, textiles, and using a form of pyrolytic carbon capture that material and turn it either into energy or other forms of chemicals, or recycle it and turn it into a carbon sequestered material. Now, the carbon is low. I'm going to tell you that right now. Organic materials have high amounts of carbon compared to inorganics. And by the way, the textiles and the plastics, they're fossil fuel based. So it's a way to take the fossil fuel base that we have currently in waste dumps. And we have 7 joint ventures. 2 of them are MSW, one in Maui, Hawaii, and one in Guadalajara, Mexico. In Guadalajara, Mexico, we have 19 communities supplying a waste dump, which we would call a landfill in the United States or in Europe. And they're putting the landfill there is different. Let's say the one in Maui, Hawaii, because people eat different things, or Japan or Europe or wherever you are on the earth. But we can take all that material and we can convert it through thermal conversion technology and other technologies to turn it into a product. Now, when I say product, I don't mean, making bottles, shoes, dresses, clothing. I'm talking about products that actually double down on reducing environmental impacts. That's what we're doing, and that's what needs to be done. And the more we do it, the better. I don't care if my competitors do it. I want them to do it, because no one group, no one company, no one planet can do it. Only all of us together can do this. If we don't do this together, we are in deep problems. And I will tell you this: the Earth is going to go on with or without us. But as Dan mentioned prior to my getting on here, the issue is livestock is one issue, but the rest of the species on the planet that we're destroying, in Australia alone, how many billions of animals died in those fires just in 2020? I mean, it's crazy. Here in the United States, I'm currently on the East Coast, but on the West Coast, in Northern California and Oregon and Washington and in Canada, huge fires that are going on board. And people can argue whether they're climate made, whether they're man made, whatever they're made. The question is, they're happening. So it's like being a doctor. Do you care if the patient's sick? What are you going to say? I'm not going to treat the patient just because I don't believe that this sickness is the cause? That's not the issue. The issue is we need to gather together and move together. Now, right now, I'm doing everything possible to form more joint ventures, because my approach is what's known as a triple bottom line. Yes, I'll get a return on investment. I'm not going to be an Apple or a Tesla. That's not the goal financially. It's to get a return for the investors. They deserve it. That's fine. Through a bond. A bond is not like a same thing as an IPO. But the difference is we also need to measure the return on the environmental impacts quantitatively. And we have those tools to do that, and we can share them with other people. The second thing we do is improve social impacts. Now, what was said before Ben spoke, and I think it was Johannes that talked about it. Whether you believe in capitalism or socialism, it's not the issue. The issue is you have to improve the local communities that you're in. And you can't take advantage of them by paying them below wage minimum. You have to give people the ability to pay for their homes, live in their homes, put their kids through school, and become what they want to become. And at the same time,
Bad timing.
Hello.
Who's on a roll?
I think he was going to say create better neighborhoods.
Yes.
Start with yourself.
Sorry, in that situation, Mr. Adam. Mr. Adam.
I think he's back.
I think he will come back.
He forgot to pay his internet.
Hey, there he is.
No. Here in the United States,
Yeah,
if somebody calls you while you're on one of these StreamYard things, it interrupts your channel. It has nothing to do with that. So anyway, yeah, I should pay it anyway, right? But seriously, what I was getting to is that you need to do, the triple bottom line was created by a guy out of Purdue University, a professor, but we've added to that. Anybody that's part of our joint venture teams, we will pay their education. So if they're out of high school and they're working on our technology systems or employing it or working for us, moving things around, and they want to go out and get a 2-year degree, a 4-year degree, we'll pay for it. And in the beginning, some of our team said, well, we need people in forestry management. We need agronomists. Let's pay for that. I just came up with the rule. I get to be the boss, so I get to say this. So I said, look, who cares if they want to get a degree? I don't have a degree in science other than psychology. My degree's in liberal arts. I have an MBA. That's it. But I am quantitative in nature. But the point is if somebody wants to get a degree in Kenyan poetry, God bless them. The better that they are educated, the better we have of having open minds and people. Not that always works, because we got a lot of naysayers that are educated. But the point is education is a key component. Whatever they want to, and why block them? So that's number one. Number two, we have a joint venture in Idaho, which is over 300 kilometers from the closest hospital. So what we're going to do there is we're going to take 1% of our profits, which is enough to create, because we have to pay the bondholders back, but we're going to take 1% of each joint venture partner's profits and plow it back into facilities there in the location. Right now, there's about 2,000 souls that live in this community. We expect it to go to 10 to 15,000. There's one, the only doctor in the location is 80 years old. We're going to bring in and create a it's not healthcare that we're paying for. What we're paying for is a facility that will allow people to go someplace in the event that they are ill or they injure themselves, and that they can get them to hospital, because to get the hospital there will take much longer period of time. We're looking at time is of the essence approach. In other words, what can we do now to make a difference between what people are living now and what they need to live to survive and prosper. It's not just surviving. It's not just about survivability. It's about prospering. And when I say prosper, I don't mean from a Tesla point of view. I'm talking about ecology, welfare of the human being. We all and our species that we are inhabiting with, that we cohabitate with. So that's my take on it. Hopefully, I've contributed something to this discussion. And with regard to CO2 emissions, I'm just going to tell you, we are working on it. It is doable. And again, the analogy that I should make is that it's like a runway. The runway is short. What we're trying to do is extend the runway for more people to survive and to prosper. If we don't do that, we're all going to be in deep problems. And the canary in the coal mine, by the way, is the Thwaites Glacier out of the South Pole. And I can go into that another time. But the other thing that you need to be aware of is that because of the Thwaites Glacier and the amount of water it's already adding to the planet, and there's different analogies. And if you go onto my LinkedIn and you see advanced resilient technology component of it, there's a Sir David King interview about the South Pole. There's going to be 200 million climate migrants in less than 7 years. Less than 7 years. Mm-hmm. If the United States is having a problem with 10,000 migrants, Haitians and other people coming across the Texas border, what's that compared to 200 million? That's insane. So I don't think they got to get their heads screwed on, and we got to act now. Time is of the essence. I'm complete.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Marshall. And beside that, World Talent Economy Forum, we are developing a climate resilient concept. Not only concept, we are developing an ecosystem. So we are inviting more corporations in this public-private partnership. So if you want to join in this ecosystem, definitely World Talent Economy Forum will invite you. And Malaysian government, they are actually providing a lot of support and a lot of initiative for these things. So even from our panelists, those who are interested to join this ecosystem, definitely as a corporation, because this is actually 100% government initiative, and we are developing Blueprint next 5 years. So hopefully it will be very effective. Mr. Adam, yeah, you are young and you have different mindset. You are transhumanist. So what the new thing you want to share with our audience?
Lovely. Thank you very much, Sharif. Good to be here. Good to see you all again. It's nice to see James again. I've seen you for a couple of weeks, I think. Is my sound okay?
A little low.
A little low.
Okay. I'll just try and project a little bit then. So, well, as some of you already know, I hail from the city of Nottingham in the Midlands in England, United Kingdom, and Nottingham has piloted a couple of interesting new initiatives, and the local council, Nottingham City Council, is quite keen for Nottingham to be world famous for piloting new initiatives and potential solutions for climate change, ecotech, green energy and green fuel. So I have lived here all my life, and so I have witnessed with my own eyes in real time the implementation of all these programs and how they have benefited the local population and students and visitors. So about a decade ago, they built an electric tram line, which has been extended a few times, and there are plans to extend the route some more to increase accessibility and to encourage more people to use this kind of transportation. It's been very convenient for me. There is a stop nearby where I live, Also, local buses have been refitted to run on gas as well. And there is a program to replace normal taxis with electric taxis. And there's also a motion for vehicles and emergency services to be replaced with electric models. And they have started doing this for local police cars. And I remember having a discussion with someone involved in that sector that there is a concept being brainstormed where the city will eventually be outfitted with platforms where I can't quite remember exactly whether they were platforms for electric vehicles to recharge around the city or panels to use vehicle movements as a resource to generate power. I think it was the first one. So yes, rapid chargers basically, which would encourage people to buy electric cars. And furthermore, the local city council has also introduced more dedicated cycle lanes, which is good for road safety as well, because cyclists and motorists are notorious for hating each other, which puts everybody involved at risk, cyclists especially. I mean, at least motorists have this metal casing, which comes with its own dangers, of course, if it's crushed like a cocoa. And the most recent addition to Nottingham's infrastructure has been electric scooters for hire, which is interesting. But the downside is that people on these scooters can get a bit carried away with how fast they're going, which is quite hazardous because they are driven on pavements as well. So I think they're looking into enforcing a speed limit for these electric scooters. I know I've been startled plenty of times when a scooter whizzes past me when I have my headphones on listening to music, but it's not unusual for new motions and endeavours to have some growing pains, of course. So yes, Nottingham has much to be proud of on that front, without sounding like too much of a plug. But yeah, and furthermore, I would like to second what Mr. Paul Beckwith said about the seas and oceans. So hopefully, what individuals like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Richard Branson, etc., are endeavouring to accomplish with space travel and colonization, trips to Mars, and so forth, that this will reignite this exploratory spirit like we witnessed with the first space race of the 20th century in the 50s and 60s, and going back a bit before that with Jack Parsons and V2 rockets. So hopefully SpaceX and so on will help to remind us that we are also explorers, as well as artists, politicians, doctors, journalists, business people. We are also explorers, and we will want to explore more of our oceans and all the new worlds and living beings waiting for us way down below. So hopefully the more we discover, the more we can see just how big our responsibilities are, and hopefully the quicker we will step up to a responsible full spectrum stewardship of this planet. But of course, we could argue using the flip side to that, where we could say that this is a part of the problem, what that is exactly the problem, and the way we explore, probe, research, and discover new knowledge, new worlds, and new things contributes to the kind of destruction we are addressing here. And also wanted to acknowledge what Mr. James Eade said about a post-capitalist society specifically. So the World Talent Economy Forum could be at the forefront of this, pioneering concepts and ideas like post-capitalism, especially knowledge-based economies and talent economies. And so for the sake of discussion and for our viewership, I'll just quickly recite the definition. So firstly, knowledge-based economy. The knowledge-based economy is an expression coined to describe trends in advanced economies towards greater dependence on knowledge, information, and high skill levels, and the increasing need for ready access to all of these by the business and public sectors. And secondly, talent economy. The open talent economy is a social environment where people can connect, share information, and build a sense of community. It is the greatest open source application shifting from traditional organizational structures to dynamic networks. So, yeah, what Mr. James Speed was saying reminded me of what Mr. Dan said during yesterday's episode, where he outlined a strategy where human civilization moves from the age of competition to the age of collaboration and cooperation, with some competition sprinkled in a kind of alchemical way, like a catalyst or enzyme. So we could be at the forefront of that, where the WTEF could pioneer the introduction of knowledge-based economies, talent economies, post-capitalism, post-money, and so on, in order to help with that transition. And as been stated here numerous times already, it is now or never for us, and we are probably at the most dramatic, most critical fork in the road ever as a species, which is very exciting, and it is a privilege really to be living through such a historic time period. Let's just hope that we make the right choices and go in the right directions. If we can save ourselves out of this current situation, we could probably save ourselves out of any other incident that may follow it. Thank you, Sharif.
Thank you. Thank you. This is an excellent discussion, and I'm sure our audience actually get a very good guideline from our speakers. And I request all of our audience share our content as much as possible with your government and with your corporation and academy. I directly want to go for the uh, uh, concluding remarks. So I want to start from Professor Donald. What's your concluding remarks today?
There, had to unmute myself. Well, I want to second what people are saying, some of what people are saying. I do want to say that the idea of a post-capitalist society and a knowledge society are actually basically assuming that like right now we have more and more of a knowledge economy, but if one of the, I mean, the definition of capitalism really is that a small group of people control the means of production, and everybody else basically works for them. And if we look at the way that society is being organized right now, the data is being owned by Google and Facebook and things like that. So what we're winding up with is knowledge capitalism, and not post-capitalism in any way. It's actually we're getting more locked into it than we were, but just the means of production have changed, but the overall structure hasn't changed. And how that can happen is very, very, I mean, we look at all the different ways that philosophies about how that's happened. I've just been spending a lot of time reading Hegel so I can understand, well, not reading about Hegel. He's so opaque. There's no way I'm going to read him directly, but and trying to, so I can try and understand Marx and, you know, the objections to him and blah blah. But anyway, it's a lot of people worked on it for a long time, and it's not something that we're going to be able to do immediately. There's a kind of a analogy. I don't know, the boy who puts his finger in the dike, and when he puts his finger in the dike, it causes a leak to happen somewhere else. And then when he puts his finger in that leak, it causes another leak to happen. And I think we're kind of in that situation right now. And the reason I say that is because there was an interesting paper that came out in Nature Communication just a few months ago, that when we plant plants to absorb CO2, that because of the greater CO2 in the atmosphere, the plants remove more CO2, use more nutrients from the ground, and therefore actually remove CO2 from the soil. So the sequestration of CO2 in the soil, it actually reverses itself. So we sequester them in the plants, but now we're not sequestering them in the soil. So we don't really, it's something that we really need to keep researching. The whole thing about the animals and is, you know, there's another point that the CO2 is making the ocean more acidic. As the ocean gets more acidic, it's killing some of the creatures that live there. The ocean is by far the biggest carbon sink. And if the ocean can't absorb the carbon, it absorbs it in two ways. One way is that the carbon dioxide just mixes with the water the same way that carbon dioxide is mixing the water in the plant in Iceland that I talked about. And just like the plant in Iceland, as the CO2 dissolves in the ocean water becomes more and more acidic. As it becomes more and more acidic, it starts to kill animals, certain kinds of animals, especially shellfish and other kinds of animals like that, and changes what kind of plants can thrive in the environment. In fact, there's some notion that jellyfish at one time were the predominant species in the ocean, and they're starting to have a resurgence. And that, you know, and not all that long in the future, we might wind up having jellyfish become the dominant species in the ocean again. we're going to have to learn how to like to eat them, I guess. But oh well. But I think that that none of the solutions that we talked about are easy solutions. That the only thing that absolutely we have to do, and as soon as possible, is stop burning fossil fuel. And I mean, that is the dead thing. So in every place that our countries are subsidizing fossil fuel, and the biggest barrier to that is political, because in the United States, Texas, Oklahoma, North Dakota, these various states survive and thrive by their oil industry. And so they're going to fight every way that they can to preserve their oil industry. And that happens globally. I mean, Saudi Arabia, UAE, all these countries, Nigeria, countries all over the world. You can't just tell them, well, stop, go back to being poor again. It's not, you just can't do that. So how we're gonna how we're gonna be able to balance this is, it's not we talk about it being something that we're going to be able to do at a local level, and do in the villages, in a village level, and things like that. But every person needs to really be able to start educating themselves and understanding how what they do influences the bigger picture. And as I've said many times before, that we are our government, and we can pressure our governments, and we can pressure organizations by not buying their stuff, and pressuring, like Harvard just divested itself of all of its fossil fuel companies in its portfolio. So those are the only things that we can do. Those are the things that we can do right now, and we can really keep our fingers crossed that some of these wonderful technological solutions will make a difference. But we've got a long way to go, I'm afraid to say.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Professor Donald, one thing, because I'm from industry, I'm heavily involved with the industries. Just one thing I just want to share, because some point we always said, hey, this is good, this is bad. Things are not like that. Let's say Saudi Aramco, they are investing on solar projects. 2021, they are investing around 1.5 gigawatt solar projects. And this is also good. Even our climate change discussions and sponsorship, everything come from Petronas. So things are not like that. Everybody actually.
Okay.
Those who are.
I don't want to. Yeah, I'm sorry if I made it that way, because they are building more windmills in Texas. BP
Exactly.
has changed its name from British Petroleum to becoming an energy company, and many of these companies are becoming aware. But part of it is because of the pressure that they're getting from. I mean, if they understand that somebody like Harvard isn't going to be able to is going to sell all of their stock, then they say to themselves, "Well, gosh, we've really got to do something so that we remain a successful company." So it works,
exactly.
Yeah.
But definitely. But fact is that they are actually adapting with the situations. They are actually taking the initiative, and we need them. We need them. So we cannot deny their financial capacity. Yes.
Yeah, I'm not trying to paint anybody
I understand
as
your
completely
views.
bad at all. I agree with you completely. I'm saying that as we understand and we put pressure on them, they understand that in order for them to continue to be successful businesses,
I do not want to say
they have to change as well.
No, it's not a pressure. Everything not in pressure. Let's say example, Petronas. They have a big universities. Petronas University, largest investment. They do a lot of research. They also know, they have pure understanding what they should go, and they are moving forward. This is actually one of the concepts we have to understand, that they are also doing, and we need to work together. We need to support each other. Then we will be successful. But if we think in that way, okay, they are not doing this, they are not doing this, we cannot win in the industry, because industry need investment. So how investment come? Investment come from big corporations, and we need to be realistic what they are doing. Even I know that Petronas, not only today, it's a long way they are investing in solar projects in South Asia, especially India. So anyway, this is very good discussion, and I want to, that is the way we are actually developing this open dialogue. So this open dialogue actually give us more understanding and more sympathy. But fact is that we have to change our mindset. Even in this discussion, we find many people come, hey, he is from opposition, he is from opposition. Things are not like that. When situation come, everybody will contribute, and we cannot ignore this kind of corporations. Even though Saudi Aramco, they heavily invest in this solar projects. Anyway, thank you for today's discussion. This is really, really helpful. Mr. Professor Paul, what's your view and what's your concluding remarks today?
Yes, yes. Hi, everybody again. In order, the topic is negative carbon emissions. So how do we capture carbon? And lots of people think, okay, we need to just grow loads of trees, billions of trees. What we've been seeing, with our present temperature, 1.1 degrees Celsius, is that we're getting an exponential increase in wildfires. And as much as they're making the news, wildfires are still, if you actually get the numbers on the actual percentage of area of the existing forests around the world and what percentage is burning, it's minuscule. Okay, it's extremely tiny. And this is at 1.1 Celsius. So when we're at 1.5 and 2, if we continue to get exponential increase in number of wildfires, in the heat intensity at which they're burning, creating their own weather patterns and spreading embers far and wide to initiate further wildfires, or having dry lightning, for example, generated in a pyrocumulonimbus cloud, generating fires 20 kilometers away. Okay, the point is that there's an awful lot of forest on the planet which can burn, and much of it will burn a degree higher, 2 degrees higher. So we have to be careful about the longevity of any carbon storage. So if we focus all our efforts on more and more tree planting, and all those trees are going up in smoke in a decade or two, then that will obviously be catastrophic. I've talked about the oceans. The oceans don't burn, so we can capture huge amounts of carbon in the oceans. Right now, a lot of carbon capture in the oceans is in marine wetlands, coastal wetlands. Kelp beds capture huge amounts of carbon because kelp grows very, very quickly. Seagrasses are very good for capturing carbon, but of course the biggest thing is actually the smallest thing in the ocean. The phytoplankton capture enormous amounts of carbon, and they require the sunlight, water, and they require nutrients. And many parts of the ocean are rich in nutrients, but are lacking one nutrient in particular, which is iron, and that's provided by dust, for example, from the Sahara. So when there's dust crossing the ocean, the iron in the dust falls and stimulates phytoplankton blooms. And phytoplankton captures enormous amounts of carbon. So one of the topics which I will be discussing, I'll be going to the COP26 in Glasgow every day. I'll be giving press conferences with various groups of people, some of them just my own work. And one of the topics is ocean pasture restoration. So the idea of generating, of having lots of phytoplankton, lots of regions of the oceans that are basically biological deserts at the moment because they're lacking some nutrient, for example, iron. They might be high in all the other nutrients. If we can seed the oceans with minuscule amounts of iron, we can generate these huge phytoplankton blooms. And if we do it right, this will be in regions where there is an existing phytoplankton. We can basically increase marine life all the way up through the food chain in these regions by for example, when floating structures in the very, very deep ocean generating the phytoplankton blooms, and then having all of the different marine creatures growing. I mean, a common thing that's thrown out is that we've lost 90% of the large fish in the ocean. And think of 100 years ago, the oceans were teeming with fish. In fact, in some regions, legend was that people could almost walk across the water on top of the fish. There were so many fish near the surface of the ocean. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but the idea is that the amount of carbon captured in the amount of carbon within the marine life 100 years ago was enormous. And we've lost over 50% of that, more like 60, 70, 80% of that. So, restoring marine life in parts of the ocean where it isn't now, it can capture enormous amounts of carbon and actually can go a long way to also providing food to feed the population of the world, which is ever increasing. And right now we're heading to food shortages, global food shortages, and famine probably within a decade from extreme weather events which are taking out, either creating drought areas, greatly reducing crops, or causing flooding in other regions. So our weakest point, the thing that climate change will affect the most and affect humanity the most is it will take out our food supply. And, we will have nowhere near enough food to feed the world. And this will cause all kinds of famines and geopolitical unrest and strife. So we're heading there very, very rapidly with abrupt climate change, whether people recognize it or not. And so we have this enormous emergency on our hands, and we really need to divert the money from military budgets to figuring out how we address climate change, because climate change is the enemy. It's not some other country. Climate change is the thing that's going to take us out more than any other thing. So so anyway, thank you everybody for attending. Thank you to all the listeners, and I'll just give a little plug for my videos. I've got thousands of videos on abrupt climate system change, what it's done in the past, what it's doing now, and what we can expect in the near-term future. And my website is just paulbeckwith.net. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Professor Paul. Mr. Marshall, what's your concluding remarks?
Okay, I'm back. These are all excellent responses that I've been listening to, and I hope the listeners are taking note of what everybody's saying. We're all on the same page. Again, time is of the essence. We need to act. We all are acting in our own way. Paul, great work. Look forward to it. I'll be attending COP26, but virtually. I'm not traveling there, but hope to see you there. In addition, I would say that one of the things that about CO2 emission reduction, it does take capital to do it. And there is a new mechanism that is being introduced in the EU. And it was kind of invented for municipal bonds here in the United States, but they're being adapted in the EU. This is the course that we're following. It's called it's a guarantee for the providers who are bringing the bond to the market. When you bring a bond to market, the value of the bond is to the bondholders. The bondholders want to risk mitigate the funds that they're putting into the bond. The way they're doing that is they call it a post-credit enhancement guarantee. Post meaning that they get the guarantee when the bond is in the market and they've purchased it. Right now, we're in our stage, we're pursuing what's called a pre-issuance credit enhancement guarantee. And that's kind of new because it allows companies like ours who have technology. We have over 40 plus patents plus trade secrets, but we also have capabilities. We can manufacture our own material. Happens to be in Europe, in Italy, in the the poor man of Western Europe. So that checks a box there. But this pre-issuance credit enhancement guarantee is a mechanism that allows us to essentially bring capital to bear and deploy it through a proven mechanism. Everything has to check the box under this taxonomy. And our taxonomy is a waste management taxonomy, which means we're taking waste, not things that are not waste. So we're taking waste and we're converting it 100% from brownfield entities into greenfield entities. And it's going to be highly watched and highly regulated. And we welcome that because it means that we're not greenwashing, which is a lot of people are doing. So we need to watch out for that. And unfortunately, that's part of the adoption of any innovation in the marketplace or in the world. So right now, we're on the innovator and early adopter side of this cycle. But once we get our bond, we will probably transition into early majority to get these types of funds used to bring other people on board, which I'm more than happy to help with, and get our solutions in place to reduce the CO2 emissions. And has been noted in this forum, CO2, whether it's in the atmosphere, in other places of our planet or the oceans, it's all relevant. Every component is relevant. So I just want to congratulate everybody on this panel, welcome everybody to the table, and let's get going. I'm complete.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Thank you. Mr. Rada.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Good. Marshall said about education. Adam talked about the knowledge factor. Very essential, very crucial for our future development and existence. What I call the knowledge is the goal of ethics. The truth, the rule expresses the truth and justifies the conduct. So the knowledge base is the knowledge of ethics. We have rules, but what we do not know is how the conduct everybody in, and that is what is very important. They needed in bringing out the knowledge base, which is empty as on today. Get the knowledge base in terms of how people conduct themselves in any corporate governance. Corporate governance denominators individuals. When you have 500,000 people or 500 people, you have a denominator as the energy factor. The energy factor is the one which we have to look at in terms of how they conduct nearly 150 years, whether it's insider trading, or it is the ESG, or it is human rights or labor rights. We do not. The organization is not bringing the data to the society's table. We got to get the data to the society's table. In whatever the manner that we try to do, if you are not able to get it, we have a major problem. And the universities have to look at. In fact, I would like to make a readout what this man said. Alan Savory, ecologist, gone into the universities as bright young people. They come out of it brain dead, not even knowing what is science means. They think it is peer-reviewed papers, etc. No, that is academia. If a paper is peer-reviewed, it means everybody thought the same thing. Therefore, they approved it. The unintended consequence is when new knowledge emerges, ever be peer-reviewed. So we are blocking new advances in science that are big advances. If you look at the breakthrough in science, almost always they don't come from the center of that profession. They come from the fringe. The finest candle makers in the world couldn't even think of electric electricity lights. It is not that I want to inform you. I want to persuade you to cut the cream ratings. Do you hear me? So this is very important,
Yes.
is Project Light. Education, learning, implementation, training, and execution. I completed. Do you hear me?
Thank you, Mr. Radha. Thank you for your contribution for World Talent Economy Forum. Mr. Jamsid, what's your concluding remarks today?
Well, I don't know where to begin. This has been great. I really enjoyed myself today. I've learned a lot. I've made a lot of notes. The thing I always say in my concluding remarks is start with yourself. You know, what can you do yourself? And, you know I'm in a place of privilege, but I have solar panels. I drive a Tesla, I have energy, compliant appliances, and there's so much more that I can do. One of the guests on one of your shows, Sharif, told me about if you have things plugged into that are just plugged in, they're energy vampires. And I looked around my house, and every room had some electronic device plugged in, and so I'm always learning. However much we know, we always know only a little, and there's more to learn. So keep learning and start with yourself. And once you change what you're doing, those in your sphere of influence will be affected, and they may change their behavior, and those in their spheres of influence may change their behavior. And soon your local community has changed. And then who knows when it stops? Keep changing. Change is not the enemy. And so what we want to do, and we can't be naive and think that everybody is going to be a good actor, jump on board. No, there are going to be bad actors out there, and we persevere despite that. We must persevere. Do not get discouraged. And absolutely, we must go into a post-capitalistic style of thinking. You know, they believe in an invisible hand. Well, how about it believing in an invisible heart? And is it too much to ask of an invisible mind? Start thinking better and about others rather than just yourself, but start with yourself. And don't point fingers at others and blame others unless you have your house in order. And even then, seek to persuade, as Sri Raja has convinced me, seek to persuade others. And it's up to every individual to do a little. So, and if many people do a little, it will mean a lot. So these are the things I want you to think about. And when I talk about a post-capitalist society, I'm not talking about Karl Marx. You know, Marx gave us these terms that are very valuable, like who controls the means of production. That's incredibly invaluable. And I love the idea that, yeah, who's controlling the knowledge? Now that's something that I wrote that down too. But you know, the idea is not to go backwards, to go forward. You know, capitalism gave us many good things, but there are consequences, and we are seeing the crisis of those consequences today. So we must think beyond just ourselves and how many cars do we own? We cannot afford to think like this anymore. We must think about us as a species together on this planet, and ask not what the planet can do for you, you selfish little person, but what can you do for your planet, you grateful and wise person. So this is my final tip to the people out there listening. It's just think about others and help others, and you will be amazed to find that you feel better about yourself. Thank you, Sharif. Another wonderful show.
Thank you, Mr. Jamsid. Mr. Dan, what's your concluding remarks?
You know, I think designing with nature is going to get us out of this problem, and nature wants us to succeed. Nature wants us to become the agents of making life multiplanetary and expanding it out into the solar system and the cosmos. And Sir Fred Hoyle, the astronomer, said, if we don't do it, some people say, oh, well, some other species, if humans fail, some other species will take up that evolutionary challenge. But he observed, no, we have a limited time window. The sun is only going to last so long. We've already used up a lot of the high grade resources and materials. We are the designated cosmic life bearer species. And I also think that's compatible with permaculture. And I think you make things fun and people will do them. You make them a game, people will do them. Use the power of bragging rights, which is more, motivating than money for a lot of people. And just to recap, the 12 permaculture ethics, I think, are so good. They could be on clocks and calendars because there's 12 of them. Real quick: observe and interact, catch and store energy, obtain a yield, apply self-regulation and feedback, use and value renewable resources and services, produce no waste, design from patterns to details, integrate rather than segregate, use small and slow solutions, use and value diversity, use edges and value the marginal, creatively use and respond to change. And that's like a formula for biomimicry, for designing the way nature designs, because we are part of nature and we need to honor nature by stewarding and giving back. And I'm complete. Thanks again for the opportunity to
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Dan. Mr. Adam.
Thank you, Sharif. Absolutely loved Mr. Raj's candle maker metaphor. That was very evocative. And I would just like to acknowledge what Professor Donald Steiny said about post-capitalism and knowledge economies, where society then becomes knowledge capitalism, which I thought was very interesting. I had a bit of a blind spot in my mind about that. And I would like to say the expression, may you live in interesting times, which I believe is rooted in being a Chinese expression originally. Mr. James E. reminded me of this very curious expression in the chat. So this is the fork in the road. Boring times, interesting times, really, really interesting times. So take your pick. Thanks, Sharif.
Thank you everyone for joining today's session. This is really, really great discussions, and hopefully with this open dialogue we can solve many social problems. Thank you, Professor Donald, Professor Paul, Mr. Marshall, Mr. Raja, Mr. James Eid, Mr. Dan, and our fellow Mr. Adam for your continuous support for World Talent Economy Forum. And dear audience, please share our content as much as possible. Thank you, bye-bye, and take care.